Hello, everyone. I did want to mention CMDC's partners. We've got industry partners that include Abbott, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and Smiths Medical. And there are a number of university partners. Those include the Bakken Medical Device Center, which is a part of the Institute for Engineering and Medicine, the Technological Leadership Institute, the Strategic Partnership and Research Collaboration at the U, also called SPARC, and of course the U of M Foundation. The CMDC is a new organization, it's growing, and those of you representing organizations that you believe ought to be part of this new center and consortium should visit CMDC at umn.edu if your organization is interested in becoming a member. Before we begin, we do want this to be a robust Q&A for individuals who are interested in careers in cybersecurity, medical device cybersecurity. So we want you to be engaged and we want you to ask questions. If you want to ask a question live, feel free to use the raise your hand feature and we'll be monitoring it. In particular, Nick Space, who is manning the session today, will be monitoring that and feeding that information to Mike and I. But if you are shy and don't want to speak, then you can use the Q&A feature as well to type in your question. Be thinking about questions throughout the panel, however, throughout this intro, so that we can sort of load them into the Q&A session. I'm pleased to briefly introduce our three speakers. We're excited to have all three of them with us because they're all TLI alums. Joining us from Boston Scientific is Andrew Baumit. He is a graduate of the class of 2015 in our MS Security Technologies program, currently the Director of R&D IT Global Product Cybersecurity. We're joined also by Shruthi Iyer, a Senior Software Reliability Engineer from Medtronic Corporation. Shruthi is from the class of 2016 in our MS in Medical Device Innovation Program. And finally, Judd Larson, Senior Technologist in Global Product Security at Medtronic. He's a 2017 graduate of our MS in Medical Device Innovation. I'm going to turn it over to Mike now, who's going to briefly introduce Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Welcome, everyone. Our folks are still kind of trickling in. So I'll just kind of repeat the website. If you're interested in some of that background information, is cmdc.umn.edu. Please check that out. It's exciting convergence and opportunity. Not that it's new. Cybersecurity for med devices isn't a brand new thing. It's just becoming more apparent to those of us, for those folks that haven't been focused on it. And I'm really excited for the panel today. Just three outstanding professionals in this field. They each have a unique background and story and path that brought them to this converged discipline. And I'm really excited to introduce the first of the three, to reintroduce Andrew. Drew as one of my former students before I took over as the Director of Graduate Studies, and has just been outstanding. In fact, his capstone in our program was about legacy medical devices in new environments, just all of the challenges that come with this space. And it's so exciting. There's so much opportunity for students and researchers and professionals to be fully engaged. So Andrew, I'm going to let you share a little bit about your background and whatever else you'd like to share around this topic. Now, just to remind everyone, chat window, you can send a chat window, you can raise your hand. We will have plenty of time for questions. So this is really about your questions. I mean, we'll give you overview and we'll share the construct about what the discipline includes, but this is the time for you to ask questions. So Andrew, why don't you share a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dan, both of you for this opportunity to present here today, and also my fellow panelists, and also everybody for joining who is interested in hearing more about careers in medical device security. It's an exciting world, I can tell you that. We live and breathe it every day, so you'll hear more about it. We look forward to that interactive session. In terms of my introduction, so I'm the Director of Global Product Cybersecurity here at Boston Scientific. But really my journey started way back when I graduated from Southwest Minnesota State University in Marshall, Minnesota, with a computer science degree focused on software development. And then I moved on to take on different roles after I graduated, involving software engineering and developing software applications, and ultimately, went into cybersecurity in healthcare. And I focused mostly and matured my career within the security architecture world after moving away from software. And then I started focusing in medical device security when I was at Health Partners at the time. And ultimately, through connections and mentoring, I met a gentleman from Mayo Clinic who then introduced me to some of the great work that Mayo Clinic was doing at that time, and offered me an opportunity to work for Mayo Clinic. So I moved down there, rather commuted down there for a number of years, just working with Mayo Clinic and building the clinical information security group there. I was employee number 3. I know that team has grown since then. And then after that, I got an opportunity to come and work for Boston Scientific in 2016, where I've been since. And I should backtrack a little bit. So after my undergrad, I worked for quite a while, and as I focused more and more on cybersecurity, I started researching to say what would be a great program to get into for my master's. And that's when I came upon TLI's program, Master of Science in Security Technology. I attended the information sessions and really liked it. And of course, University of Minnesota is a very reputable university. And so I joined that program, and honestly, it has paid off. The knowledge that I learned through some of the professors who taught us, Mike Johnson and team, it is, I put it to use every day. I can tell you, we had sessions where we're talking about communicating to, executive leadership, right? Practicing that, writing memos. I do that every day, right? So it really bears fruit. So if you're all out there and thinking about, what degrees and education to take, and you're already in that path, way to go. Back to Boston Scientific. So what's my role here? So I report up the corporate R&D organization and matrix to the corporate IT through the Chief Information Security Officer. And we focus on medical device security. My team is global, so it's centralized. Boston Scientific has 6 different divisions that produce different types of products. And so we support all those teams across the R&D divisions. And it's the whole gamut, right? Talk of, helping with the architecture reviews, talk of security pen testing, simulating what hackers can do to our devices, and then helping the engineers understand those, those trade-offs between security and usability, right? So my team does that. We also do governance, right? We look at what the FDA is saying, what other regulators are saying, what our customers are saying. Should we turn that into a policy and help all the divisions standardize, across? So we do that within the centralized global cybersecurity team. And of course, then there's the IT security pillar that has, that takes care of the enterprise security, which tons of opportunities in that area as well with different expertise. And finally, the other thing that we've been doing more and more at Boston Scientific is really partnering with academia. So one of the really fruitful partnerships that we have, as Dan alluded to, is being a part of the Center for Medical Device Cybersecurity, and really partnering with them to define and say, what are we looking for talent? What should the universities be helping to train, right? And so we worked with Mike Johnson, Dan's group, to look at the curriculum. What would that look like for about 16 credits, I believe, or 20? And that's being rolled out. So that website that Mike and Dan shared, I would really encourage everyone to click on that and just take a look at that. That's a partnership between Medtronic, Abbott, and ourselves, and others as well, really shaping and forming that so that whatever you're learning within these programs is really practical in the medical device industry, right? The other thing also is this summer, I'm really excited to be part of this sponsor group, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, St. Jude, and others are sponsoring, some projects through the BMDC, or Bracken Medical Device group. And we are sponsoring an internship group where we have 2 projects that we are, helping to mentor through the summer. The teams are working on authentication is one of the projects. The other project is forensics and logging. And these are just students from diverse backgrounds just running this program in the summer. And we are trying to create that awareness and support that initiative for the first time, focusing on cybersecurity. So lots of partnership with University of Minnesota. And so really, I'm excited to be a part of this panel today. So I'll pause there, and I think I'll hand it back to you, Mike. Thank you again.
Mike, oh, you're muted.
You know, when we all show up back in the classroom, I will finally have figured out how to unmute myself. But apparently 14, 15 months hasn't been enough. I apologize. I was just thanking Andrew for a great overview and reminding the audience this is time for you. And so think of your questions that might be appropriate for Andrew. But we're going to keep moving through the three panelists and give you those high-level overviews. And then we'll come back and still have a good chunk of time at the end. So think about your questions, but I will actually let Dan introduce Shruthi, because Shruthi was a student of Dan's directly. And so go ahead, Dan, why don't you share a little bit about it?
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Shruthi Iyer. You know, the program is now, we're in our 7th or 8th year, and yet we're small enough and lean enough. You know, I remember and know every student, and so it was a joy having Shruthi in the cohort. And Mike threw down the gauntlet by articulating what Drew's capstone was, and so that really puts me on the spot. In Shruthi's case, Mike, I happen to know what her capstone was on. At least generally, it was on the topic of pros and cons of using cloud-based storage and applications for medical devices and clinical information. And Shruthi's not going to challenge that, because she's not nodding her head, but she's not gonna say if I'm wrong, right, Shruthi? It's a pleasure to introduce you, and we just want to hear a little bit about you.
Thank you so much. And Dan, that was a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. And one thing that's very distinct is, you're right, it was such a small cohort, yet we could learn from every single one of those students. And I think having MDI and that experience has really shaped how I think about different challenges that come up in industry and whatnot too. So I really appreciate that introduction. My name is Shruthi Iyer. I currently serve as a senior software reliability engineer over at Medtronic. I support late stage heart failure. So currently, as a reliability engineer, we focus on new product development, and throughout that product lifecycle, from inception until release, we kind of look at different interfaces, different areas where, you know, if an anomaly comes up, if a software anomaly comes up, we are looking at how do we best interact with our different stakeholders, whether that's quality, whether that's regulatory, whether it's software development, whether it's the security team, and kind of working to best articulate the risks in that system, and how can we best mitigate those risks or prevent those risks from becoming a vulnerability in our product. So how I slowly started to get more exposure into cybersecurity was actually through MDI. Prior to MDI, I had studied biomedical engineering. I graduated in 2014 from the University of Minnesota with my bachelor's. And upon doing that, I started at Medtronic pretty early. I started in the software development side. We were working on Android applications for chronic pain, so pain stimulation devices, implantable devices. And during that time in patient care software, I felt like I was a very small piece of the giant puzzle, which is the medical device industry. It seems like the contribution I was making, although very valuable, it seemed like it was a very microscopic piece to this giant conglomerate, which is the medical device industry. And what brought me to MDI was the ability to kind of connect both the engineering side, so the hardcore technical device engineering side, with more of the business side. So understanding how best to communicate with both of these different realms, and where do I uniquely sit in the medical device space between these two realms. As I slowly started to get more classes under my belt in the MDI program, I realized that there was one kind of area of focus that was so vital that every single member who went through MDI should have some limited knowledge of, if not more, which is cybersecurity. It comes up in all of our conversations. Being in the software side, you know, software is something that's ever changing, but so is cybersecurity. And I think what I learned the most through my capstone and through the work in the MDI program was how truly changeable, dynamic, and fickle the cybersecurity industry is. And when you're trying to live up to how quickly technology advances, you want to make sure that you have enough security precautions that are as well advanced, if not more. And I think that kind of was my biggest takeaway from the MDI program. And now that some of these learnings are things that I'm applying in my everyday work as well. And I think Drew mentioned it really, really well. Whatever we built on those building blocks, whether it may be our quality classes, our forecasting classes, or even the cybersecurity related capstone that I worked on, truly comes into play in our day-to-day interactions with our various stakeholders, whether it's external facing or regulatory representatives, or whether it's internal facing with our stakeholders in our development team. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for being involved in this session today and giving me the opportunity to be present, and I'm ever willing to answer any questions. So anyone in the audience, feel free to type something up and send it out. So thank you.
Thank you, Shruthi. And last but not least, Judd Larson, who finished a year after Shruthi, and therefore his capstone should be in the forefront of my mind. And I still remember, at least in principle, you looked at, Judd, your capstone was on medical devices as threat vectors, and you assessed sort of risk mitigation measures associated with those. I hope I'm correct, but please introduce yourself.
The little tweak on that is I look specifically at extortion. So if you see in the news, maybe some oil pipelines or beef production getting held up with ransomware, that's one of the segments that I looked at in regards to medical devices. So, yeah. Welcome to everybody. My story probably begins back in high school, actually. I took a exploring technology class with a teacher who told us all about how CAT scans work and MRIs and these medical devices. And then the next week was programming classes. So I think that's the first domino that started falling. Education wise, I got my bachelor's degree from the U of M in a business, which is a little different than a lot of the other engineers that have talked already. From there, I started working at the U, doing computer repairs, things like that. Nothing too terribly technical, but working with people, helping them out. And then after doing that for a few years, I started at the Technological Leadership Institute doing my medical device innovation program. And that was actually the first year that the MSST program offered their cybersecurity minor. So I did the medical device program on one side and then got my cybersecurity minor on the other, which was a lot of fun. Great exposure, and the two programs play very well off of each other in how you learn. After that, it set me up for an interesting job, and I ended up going more of the security route than the medical device route. So I went to Fairview Health Services, which is a Minnesota-based health system. Started doing mobile device management, making sure all the doctors' iPhones were working, that the iPads in the patient rooms were doing well. After mucking around with enough stuff, I ended up running the firewall on the network. So I got to do IT infrastructure, see how the hospitals tick from the inside, chasing down bad guys, knocking on the computers. It was a great time. But the next opportunity for my career growth was with Medtronic. And I moved there about 2.5 years ago now. And I am on the central global product security team. At Medtronic, we've got the central business functions and then 20 operating units. And most of those operating units have individual cybersecurity teams for those specific products, and they specialize and dig in deep and understand those things. My role is more of an oversight and coordination role, where we're making sure that everyone's doing the same things, holding everyone to the same high standards. In some areas where a given organizational unit doesn't do things very often, we lend our expertise there. That's often in the form of threat modeling or penetration testing. And we also run the regulatory and quality management system side of things as well. It's a really interesting place to be. My team and myself, we get to touch all the different areas of Medtronic, and it's really a good time.
All right, thank you, Judd. Well, we're gonna switch over to our Q&A session now,
So I don't see any questions yet. Dan, do you see anything coming through? So again, reminder, this is for you. So please feel free. If you don't want to speak in front of a crowd, that's great. That's fine. Just send a chat. I would like to point out though, you just heard from 3 people who have one thing in common and many things that aren't, or 2 things in common, many things that aren't. One of the things that's in common is they work for a medical device manufacturing organization. The second is that they found a path that brought them through the Technological Leadership Institute. But they all started in very different places. You've got a biomedical engineer, you've got a computer science background, and you've got a business, operations management kind of a person who are all doing things in the same space. I love to point that out because I think there's some misconceptions about different industries and different disciplines. Oh, to do medical device security, I have to be a biomedical engineer. And of course, that is great foundation, but it is not required. So whatever path you find that interests you, I'm just speaking about Drew, since I have more interaction with him. It's the passion, what drove him, what was he interested in? It sounds like Judd as well. Judd was a student in ST as well. And they're driven by passion and curiosity. So I just want to throw that out there. Don't close any doors at any point in your career, but especially early on. No doors should be closed unless you've decided, I just hate seeing blood. I don't want to be in a medical operating room or something like that. That's fine. But don't close any doors to your path to your future success. There are so many opportunities and there is so much need in all of these places. If you generalize cybersecurity roles, there's different studies, but about 500,000 open cybersecurity related roles in the United States right now. Of course, that's not 500,000 medical related, but a good chunk of those are certainly connected somehow to medical, and 2 million or so open roles globally. So don't close any doors. Look at the folks in front of you. What questions did I take up some time and we get some questions, or we still don't have any questions? Please consider. Oh yeah, Judd, go ahead.
One commonality that Drew and I have is we both worked for hospital systems as well. So that's another great place where you can put your interest in medical device security into play, because they need that expertise just as much as the device manufacturers.
So we've got some questions.
Let me.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead,
we've
Drew.
got some. I was just going to add to that. In that flavor of, it doesn't matter what your background is. I think cybersecurity, our chief information security officer always says it's everyone's responsibility, right? So whether you're at home, you're concerned about your computer, you're concerned about your phone. When you're in college, you're concerned about, making sure that your whatever paper you're writing is secure and it's not going to end up in the wrong places. So it's everyone's responsibility. But it reminds me of Mayo Clinic. One of the leaders that I came to respect very well in the cybersecurity leadership team actually had a background in accounting. She was an accountant for a long time, and then she switched over to cybersecurity, and she led our team, and she was great and still great at it. So, yep.
Excellent.
Questions?
Well, we've got a question. Actually, we've got several questions. So I'll ask the first, and then Mike, you can follow up. When did you first become interested in medical device cybersecurity?
I can go.
And yeah, go. We'll start with Drew, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance to answer. So go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I think, like I said, I started off as a software developer. So then I got hired in 2009, got hired into Park Nicollet to help the security team automate a lot of the manual processes for provisioning access to different, clinicians and nurses, because I was taking up a lot of time, right? Because you've got different multiple roles for security profiles. And so I got hired into that team, and they had projected that we were going to take about 2 years to automate a lot of those tasks. And with a lot of help from different folks, we were able to get it done in about 6 months. And then I looked up and I said, "What next?" And they started kind of extending to me to say, "All right, we've got these new system we're bringing in for identity and access management. Can you work with the architect in that?" So I got into it. And so I was living and breathing, working with a security team all the time. And, that's how my mindset switched away from being a developer to now, cybersecurity. And I was really fascinated because I was reading at night big time, learning new things so that I can apply it the next day. And so as I learned, I realized that this is an industry that is very dynamic, right? You are dealing with the threats. You are also dealing with different technologies that were being built at the time, still being done at the moment with different vendors as well. So I think that the passion of it came for me is that it was very dynamic. I think Shruthi said it well. It changes every day, and that is how it's been since 2009. And so it's very hard to walk away from that adrenaline pumping environment, right? And you're always growing, you're always learning something new. I always say, if someone comes to you and says, "I am a cybersecurity expert and I know everything," walk away, because you will know one thing today and tomorrow you realize that, "Oh my gosh, I did not know that." And you have to do your research, keep learning, talk to people, use your network. So yeah, so for me, it was, in the early stages of 2009 when I transitioned out of a team within cybersecurity.
So Drew, I want to make sure people aren't running away scared. Just because there's new things every day, that's actually a good thing. That keeps things interesting and keeps you motivated and driven. It's not like, "Oh my gosh, I'm never going to keep up. I'm never going to be good enough," because that's the point of having a team and a network, and you share across. So I just want to make sure no one is frightened by the idea of, "I have to continue to learn for the rest of my career," because that's actually a good thing.
And Mike, that actually helps people jump in on this. If they're brand new to cybersecurity, because it's ever changing, you can start yesterday, you can start today, and still come up to speed on some of these new trends. So I agree with you.
Good job. Good point.
And so Shruthi, how about you? You've talked a little bit about your background, but just cover the basis. You indicated that it was really in the MDI program that you first learned about it. So maybe just elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so during the time of the program, I was serving as a software engineer. And one of the kind of nebulous areas, even in device development, was we were using off-the-shelf technology, so like a Samsung tablet, and we were putting our own application on there. And not only that, we had proprietary Medtronic devices, an implantable as well as a communicator. There's a lot of interfaces that are happening in that system. So one thing that came up often in our conversations is, what can we do better in terms of securing this device? Because there's so many moving parts. And frankly, some of them are being sourced from external vendors. Granted, Samsung does a rigorous job of making sure their devices are secure, but now because they're a part of our system, there's even a question of ownership. Who owns the security of the entire system when a component of it is off the shelf? So because of conversations like that I was hearing at work, I was able to kind of utilize the tools that we discussed, whether it's in my capstone or whether it's in our MDI classes, that kind of helped kind of show me a path forward onto how to kind of come to the answer. The truth be told, right? At the end of the day, we had to realize that ownership is divided in the sense that we can't expect to have coverage from a device manufacturer standpoint. We cannot claim to have coverage over Samsung, but we can have very clear contracts in place to draw that distinction of who owns the security of each piece of this system. And that's something I did learn because I went through it. And at the same time, in classes, we would have these discussions that would bring out some of these ideas, and you could talk to your classmates who may have gone through something similar in their industries, and they can chime in and help guide you as well. So that's what I would say.
Wonderful. And of course, that's one of the things that we've observed in the program, is that nothing like learning and applying to your work the very next day. Thank you. How about you, Judd? You don't need to go any further back than high school, but you know, it sounds like the passion for you started early. But when did you really start thinking about medical device cybersecurity? Because I don't recall when you decided on what your capstone was going to be.
Well, the first thing that really tied things together for me, this is a tip for anyone around a major university, is if you're interested in something, there's probably some event going on at the university you can sign up for and attend that doesn't seem like it should be open to the public, but it is. So in my case, it was in 2014, there was a medical device symposium, medical device security symposium, that the U of M was hosting and it was in association with the US government. And I was just looking for interesting things to attend because I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my career. And out of other events that I went to this one, and that just kind of got the itch going. So then I started looking at other sources and learning more about this security stuff. And then that's about when I started the MDI program, and that's when the spark turned into a fire.
Excellent. Thank you.
So Judd, actually, could I have you expand a little bit? Since your background is the furthest away on paper from ending up in med device cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So it sounds like some of the things that drove you to this direction are that event. You also said that you found some employment in an area that gave you opportunities through OIT or through the technology department.
Yep.
Were there any classes? Did you do anything more structured that kind of paved the path, or was it all through these just peripheral activities? So you have your degree, you're going to your business and econ classes, but you're doing these other things while you're getting your degree. Were there any classes or any academic areas that you focused on in your undergrad?
No, not at all. This, it kind of starts with, you see some of this cybersecurity stuff and it seems like magic. Like how is this bad guy getting into this network and how are they doing these things? Like, it's not designed to do that. So you start reading some articles because it's interesting. And then, you pick out something, you learn about what a denial of service attack is, and you spend a little time figuring that out. And then, so the next time when it comes around, maybe you dig a little deeper and figure out what that is. So it's not like I, really bared down and really, exhausted myself doing it. It was just kind of that I'm curious about it. I want to dig in, and it just keeps coming. So let's keep going.
Perfect. And I just wanted to have you share that because that's a common path towards many cybersecurity related careers. But since cyber device is relatively new, it's probably even more common in that area. And so, Dan, just so you know, I don't see the questions. And so I'm going to let you drive the submitted questions, so that I will stop interrupting now because now we have questions. So go ahead.
Okay, we've got some great ones. But Mike, by the way, you might be able to look under your more tab.
Don't worry about it. I'll dig around. But you go ahead and
So first question is from Janal Mystery. Who's interested in knowing how to get started on learning about medical device cybersecurity if you don't have a software background. So Judd, I think you've partially answered it, but perhaps you'd all like to opine a little bit on this. Judd, do you want to start?
One addition to what I said before, one of the coolest things about security and cybersecurity is all the educational material you could want is available freely online. If you're searching for the right things, there's no barrier to entry if you have an internet connection or a smartphone. So you can get down to the nitty gritty, the most detailed stuff if you really want to, or you can go wide and learn about a whole bunch of things. So in addition to just being curious, there isn't that barrier that, say, being a doctor or other, if you don't know calculus or something like that, it's not a barrier.
Okay, that's reassuring for those of us who struggled with calculus. Shruthi?
Yeah, I want to tell Gino that the first best step is to attend forums like this, where you're exposed to people who work in the industry, you're exposed to programs that are based in the University of Minnesota that would help kind of provide that paving to get into that industry. So great first step is what I would say. Secondly, I want to say that I agree with Judd. I think it's very specific channels too. If you think about it, I've spoken to several associates, friends, colleagues in cybersecurity. So although I'm a stakeholder, I interact with several of those. A lot of them mention Reddit as a very good source of figuring out what's a current trend. Whether it would be current vulnerabilities that might be in other spaces, whether it's the network space, whether it's the software space that may be tangentially related to medical device, may not be completely medical device right away, but it's good to kind of have your ears open and listen to those signals in other industries and see how they can be applied or how they can be incorporated into a medical device lens as well. So that's what I would recommend.
Excellent. And Drew?
Yeah, so all great points. I think I would have pretty much said the same thing. So what's left here is to say, start here, right? You see 3 panelists here actually include Dan and Mike. Find us on LinkedIn, connect with us, right? Networks, that's really one of the best ways, right? Network with us. We're really social folks. If you ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey, Drew, I hear there was this breach at this hospital. Tell me more about medical device security. I'd be happy to engage, even if it's on LinkedIn, right? So use your networks on LinkedIn. Go to conferences, like Judd said. There's always something going on here in Minnesota alone. I think, especially towards the fall, actually spring and fall, the Secure 360 conference, big conference. It has a student discount if you're a student. Attend it here in person at in the Twin Cities. Obviously, these past 2 years it was virtual, but tons of information you'll get there. They have different tracks, right, of cybersecurity, and you'll find medical device security there. There's a cybersecurity forum, and that's sponsored by the U of M. That's going to be happening in October. Mike can speak more to that. Attend that. I think there's a heavy discount for students as well there. Just attend it. Immerse yourself with a group there that are the speakers, and then as you leave, make sure to connect with 1 or 2 people who is in the medical device space, and then just continue building your network. I think so. That's an organic way to grow into medical device security. Obviously, there's the academic, there's the research way you can do it, which you can with an internet connection, you can do a lot of that.
I thank you for bringing up conferences, Drew. I am going to jump in here just because I have a lot of connections. I work very actively in that arena as a chair of activities and events. And you brought up too, Secure 360, which just happens every May. We'll be in person again next year. It can be intimidating. It's a bunch of work. If you're an undergrad or even just thinking about going into an educational program and you're still in high school, perhaps, it can be intimidating, but don't let it be, because Drew uncovered the dirty secret of tech geek people. We actually do like to talk to people. We may hide in our basements. I am in my basement right now, but we still get out. And so don't let that stop you. But if it still is a hurdle, I chair an event called the Student 360, which is a miniature version. Is planned for October 1st-ish, give or take. We're still trying to find a venue, given some of the challenges with our pandemic. But that is a student-focused. The attendees are all going to be students. So just think about attending something like that and growing your network through those connections. And then when you all exit your undergraduate educational opportunities and enter the real world, they'll still be in your network, right? And then it's still a valuable resource. So the 3 events, I'll repeat them. Secure 360 is in May. University of Minnesota is the founder of the Cybersecurity Summit, which is the October 27th event. There's a student discount for both of those events. And the Student 360 event in October 1st-ish, which is not free, but it's very, very low cost. But it doesn't even cover the food that we serve the students. It's just a small token to make sure you show up, because sometimes you'll sign up and you won't go because there's no reason. So anyway, please look into that. If you want more info, reach out to me. I'll be happy to share it. And by the way, Judd also put, if you haven't been watching your chat, he put another resource like Reddit in the chat there. So take a look at that. So I want to make sure we had complete coverage of the conferences. I'm done now. So go ahead, Dan.
All right, that's great. We got an excellent. We got another question from Adam, And it is that it seems a common passion for people in medical device industries, the desire to help people and improve lives. How does this tie into cybersecurity and your individual passions for working in this area? It's a great question. Shruthi, why don't you start with that one?
Yeah, I would love to take this one. So very, very good question. I think one of the reasons that we're all in that medical device space, and I can speak for myself, I am really passionate about helping people. I'm also very passionate about being creative. And Judd knows this. We've exchanged notes quite a bit about graphic design and many other things, but I believe that creativity is best when it's exercised. And I feel like it's only exercised when there are lots of constructs in place. And I think that kind of playing field is what cybersecurity has provided for me. There's lots of rules, regulations, good practices, not so good practices, vulnerabilities, things changing every day. And it feels like the rules change every day, and it makes that game of making sure that your device has the right mitigations and right preventions in place. That game gets really interesting day by day. So the creative part of me is well exercised every day coming into work, wanting to do more to help advance the development of our device to make it more robust. Now, the second part of the question was the patient impact. Day in and day out, as a risk and reliability engineer, our focus is to figure out what are the vulnerabilities in our system that would lead to adverse patient impact. So that is the core of what I do. But I think in doing programs like MDI, in going through different roles through Medtronic, whether it would be the software engineering role, I served as a systems engineer for a while, in every aspect of that mission of bringing the correct devices, the adequate therapies to our patients, and really improving their quality of life is what drives all of us. And I'm sure my colleagues would agree on this, that this is why we do what we do. So very, very good question. I think that's kind of how I tie it together. It's that creativity aspect of the challenge changing every day, and therefore the solution must evolve every day as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Shruthi. Drew, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Shruthi covered it really well. And thank you for that question, Adam. Passion is really what drives us. It's really what makes you the best of yourself. So when you think of it, the work that we do every day in cybersecurity, while we have a passion for that, the creativity, the dynamics of it and everything, when you tie that into that patient, we hear patient stories as we work for medical device companies. I'm sure the same thing is with Medtronic. We have patient testimonials that all the employees get to hear. And I can tell you, people walk away in tears when you hear how a medical device was able to impact a patient. And so now when you think of our contribution in cybersecurity, one of the things that, think of a patient who gets a heart attack and they go in and they have to get an implant placed in them. Now you have someone who is carrying a device, a technology in them. Think of it, if you put yourself in their shoes, there's a lot of fear. And then think of the way the news, moves around very quickly if there's a, security breach or there's a hack of some sort. And that fear that it creates on the patient, and to know that, every day when we come to work, we are pushing to ensure that, we are, one, building secure devices, two, reassuring that patient, our customers who are purchasing these devices to use at the hospitals. And finally, that could be your relative, right? That could be my grandpa, that could be my grandma, it could be, someone I know, someone I sit by at the plane, and to be able to know that you can reassure them and say, it will be all right, because, there are people who are focused and thinking about that every day as we build these devices. So that's part of that passion that really drives us. It's that drive behind what we do.
Thank you, Drew.
Mhm.
Judd?
To kind of roll back to the earlier question about someone coming from with a non-technical background, that can be extremely important. And one reason that's important, and one thing that I'm really fired up right now about, so to be very specific, is how you communicate cybersecurity vulnerabilities to patients. And if you create fear by telling someone that this vulnerable thing is going to happen, and you don't have a way to balance that out with the clinical benefits, you can create this churn and this fear. And if a person chooses to not get a life-sustaining or life-improving procedure because they're scared of a security vulnerability, that's just as bad as if something actually happens to them, in my opinion. So for people without that technical background, you have a little bit of that ability to kind of empathize with the general population and say, I don't know that much about this computer stuff. So how can we sculpt this message, or how can we do things so that the average person makes the correct risk-based decision with their doctor?
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Well, we've got another outstanding question from Ravi, and this I'm gonna make an assumption here that this may be specific to courses within the TLI programs. But if you all think there's a broader context, certainly chime in. Can you share something on course structure on campus versus off campus, and how suitable these courses are for the working professional? And well, Drew, let's let you start on this one.
Yeah, so I think Mike probably would do a good job of this at some point. But this is what I would say. I did. When I did my Master of Science in Security Technologies at the U of M, I was commuting to Mayo Clinic every morning at 6, and coming back from Mayo Clinic at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, hopping in my car in Inver Grove Heights and breezing all the way to the campus at the West Bank to attend classes, right, from 6 p.m. to 9 at night, and then of course meeting with my cohorts to do projects after that. So, so these courses, I think, are tailored to those folks who are already in industry. Some of the folks who actually come and teach you, the contributing professors, they're coming from industry. So, so I think there's that mentality that's already been captured, especially in a course like cybersecurity. There is the one that you can take within, general credits within your courses. And I won't be able to speak well to that, but Mike should, and Dan should be able to do that. But then also there's the core courses that you are taking because you're already a professional. You have some background in it already, and you're just adding, augmenting that with these courses. So yeah, so I think it's practical, it's workable, so to speak. There are courses out there. Will I be able to speak articulately about specifics of it? Probably not. So I'll leave that to the experts.
Good job, Drew. I will want to step back just one step though, because we happen to have 3 outstanding professionals. They happen to be graduates and alumni of TLI. So there is a concentration of that, and Drew did a good job of articulating how we at TLI approach this problem. Our program is designed for people who are already working. In fact, when I have applicants who don't have any work experience to speak of, we discuss how do they get some relevant work experience so they can take full advantage. This is a small portion of the opportunities that exist, and I don't want to diminish all of the rest of the paths. Even if I wasn't at TLI, which by the way, I was the chief security officer at Bremer Bank for 20 years before I came to the university. So my life is actually in corporate America before joining the team here. But I highly recommend educational paths. You should really get a formalized education if that's at all possible for yourselves. 4-year degrees provide a whole bunch of value. You heard Drew talk about communicating, and Jed, I think, mentioned it. And actually, all 3 of the panelists have mentioned the value and the importance of communication. And those things aren't cybersecurity specific. So getting education exposure is important. And then adding on cyber is many ways. You can take cyber classes. You can be involved in clubs and activities. You can go to conferences. There are many, many, many ways, including volunteering at your workplace once you have a workplace, to participate in projects. There's just an endless availability of opportunities. But the fact that some of them are targeted towards working professionals is good, because a lot of times people want to shift and want to focus. though folks who are just entering their educational careers and undergraduate opportunities, of course, those are probably going to look more traditional, of daytime classes and maybe on campus. And all of these paths are appropriate. I guarantee you can find a path that will fit with your life. Wherever you are in that spectrum. I'm a senior in high school. I've been working for 20 years in a field, and I really am excited and interested in changing it up and going everything in between. There are paths. I offer myself to anyone who wants to talk about a cybersecurity career, whether it includes TLI or not. One of my favorite things to do is to talk about opportunities for people, because there is no way TLI can address the issue by ourselves anyway. We think it's a great option, but there are many, many, many options. So that's what I would say about the question about, can I make it work? Yes, you can make it work, whether it's with us or someone else. You can absolutely make it work. The most important ingredient, in my opinion, I'm on the opinion podium, Drew and Jed, if you recall that from class. In my opinion, it's passion, curiosity, drive that are so much more important than anything else to be successful as a cybersecurity professional in any field. And I would think even more so in medical device, because there's less known. It's less explored. It's not as well traveled. Banking, which is my background, is very well traveled. Many, many, many people have been studying it and working on it for years. Cybersecurity of medical devices, less well traveled, and has lots of opportunities for new exploration and new opportunities.
Shruthi, I want to give you and Jed an opportunity just to add any color commentary. So what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so I agree with Mike. I want to emphasize the fact that the MDI program was so customizable. So one thing that I really got out of it is I had completed a directed study, so an independent study, which I paired with Professor Brian Isle. And he, as a stepping stone to my capstone, I wanted to really look at what are the barriers to adoption that companies face when they're considering a cloud-based solution. So one of those barriers to adoption was how secure they felt that solution would be. And is this a perception, or is this actually the technology not being secure enough or mature enough to be incorporated? And that was one of the questions that I wanted to delve into. So because MDI kind of provides that little bit of fluidity to kind of focus in on the area that you're particularly interested in, I think that really helps you construct that class structure the way you want it to look.
Jed?
To take this down a different route, because formal education is fantastic. You want credentials to point to, but one of the most valuable things to me is in 2016, I think I watched every single YouTube video about DEF CON. DEF CON is a hacker conference. And if you go into an interview for a security position and say something like that, that will be a fantastic conversation to have. Even if you don't have a real credential, you still have to know things, but anything to demonstrate that you care and you're interested, go for it.
Very good. We've got two. We're running short on time here, but we've got a couple of great questions. I'm going to try to do these really, at least one or two of them really quickly. And this one is a good one. What do you see as the biggest misconception of people or the media in relation to medical device cybersecurity? How do you deal with these misconceptions? Now, this could take all afternoon, but I'm going to let Shruthi start, and maybe we can just quickly go through the panelists.
The biggest misconception I've heard is that there will always be problems and we can't do anything about it. So almost did this like give up type of thought process that I've heard. The way that we dispel this is by telling everyone to get educated. The way that Judd said, watch videos, get exposure, read articles, just understand the environment. So everyone, if you're not a security professional, you work in a medical device corporation, you can still participate in those conversations. In fact, your perspective might be so valuable in a security conversation. So that's what I would say. It's not a, hey, let's give up because it's always going to be a problem. It's more of a conversation as it's ever evolving. What can we do about it?
Excellent. Judd.
This is a lot to unpack here. I in biggest misconception, a lot of times, especially over the past couple of years, we've seen certain vulnerabilities get blown out of proportion. This is a huge deal, but really it's not a big deal. And then there are other things that like, well, that was actually a really big deal and no one noticed. So I think there is a level of maturity that's missing in media coverage, but how you deal with it, education is important, but also making sure you have those messages tailored and you are calibrating appropriately. So when the sky is falling, you're able to say the sky is falling, and people trust you on that. And if it's not falling, you've established a trust, so people believe you there.
Excellent. Great answer. And Drew.
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest misconception, one of the biggest anyway, is just ignorance, right? A lot of people have their day jobs. They have, you've got our grandparents who don't necessarily focus on technology a lot, and so they depend on the news, right? And the journalists, as much as, they try the best they can, oftentimes, they don't necessarily get all the information too because of different reasons, right? And so they put out what they can. And social media, you know how that is, those are not necessarily validated. So ignorance, right? So, and how do you get to the bottom of that? I think for us, it's just reassuring and directing people to the right, place to get the information about the medical device security for a particular vulnerability. For example, is you go to that manufacturer, whether it's Medtronic or Abbott St. Jude or Boston Scientific, we all have websites that have, just focused on medical device security that you can look at to see, if there's vulnerabilities on a particular device or there's news out now, about a particular vulnerability. Just go there and look at, or call in, call to those manufacturers and find out for yourself. So get to the bottom of the story, get to the facts, and I think that will help a lot.
Okay. Well, we've got a few other questions, but we're sadly going to have to wrap up now. So I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. Special thanks to our panelists, Drew Baumit, Shruthi Iyer, and Jed Larson. We're proud of all of you, and we really do appreciate you taking time to join us. Obviously, thank you to the audience. Thanks also to Mike, who we failed to mention is also an MS Security Technologies alum, which speaks to his passion about the program. And finally, just for those of you interested in a career in medical device cybersecurity, you've got invitations from everyone on the panel to reach out to them by LinkedIn, as well as Mike and I. And but here are three broad resources. Certainly visit the website for the new Center of Medical Device Cybersecurity. Visit the College of Science and Engineering for information about courses and broad programs. And visit the website for the Technological Leadership Institute. These are places where you can engage with others. Follow us, follow each of these organizations on Twitter and LinkedIn and what have you. In addition to the other resources. I think engaged, being curious, as our panelists have said, being engaged and taking that first step towards learning. You don't need to know everything. Good friend told me, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So learn a little bit more, and before you know it, you'll be an expert. So with that,
Dan, actually, I'd like to make a plug. I mean, we've been talking a lot about TLI, but if you are interested specifically in MDI or TLI, MDI or MSST, we do info sessions. I just happened to have, this was scheduled before this lunch and learn. I happen to have an info session scheduled for this afternoon, 5 o'clock. MDI has one probably next week. Anyway, so if you're interested, Google MSST or TLI MSST, TLI MDI, and you'll find our resources. And those are free, of course. And it's just another opportunity to talk about the opportunities at TLI. And I am available, as I said, to talk about opportunities no matter where they might be.
And thanks for bringing that up, Mike. And I was just reminded that our MDI is having our info session tomorrow at noon. So it's a lunchtime meeting. So interested parties, please do join us. We're always interested. So again, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it, and best wishes on each of your careers in medical device cybersecurity. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, panel. Outstanding contributions, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much.
Hand it over to Nick. Thanks.
I think that wraps us up, and so